Hello, everybody. Welcome. So this is David Drapkin. I am the Director of Education and Training at Psychedelics today. I'm one of the creators and managers of the Vital training course, and I'm here today in a Vital Psychedelic conversation with our friend and one of our teachers, Glauber Assis, who is in Brazil. Lovely to see you, Glauber. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you very much for this kind invitation. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really excited to see your presentation today. So I had a sneak peek at Glauber's slides. They're beautiful to look at and really deep. He's a very deep man. And we met at New York a couple months ago at the Horizons conference. It was a beautiful thing. I could only go for one day, but we really had a great connection. Um, and there's just so much for us to learn about. It's never ending. So today is a really special topic. And the reason we're calling it a vital psychedelic conversation is because we are right now interviewing students for our next round of Vital. So Vital is, if you didn't know, our 12-month training course that is opening up for the fourth time, beginning September 17th. So it's a wonderful course. Students from all over the world, both licensed mental health practitioners and unlicensed wellness practitioners, and underground folks and people all over the world that feel called to understand themselves, psychedelics, consciousness, and community, and what the future can bring for them. It's an integrative course, multidisciplinary, with 5 specialization options where you can basically choose what major you'd like to graduate in. So some of the graduations that we have are things like microdosing, somatics and trauma, regenerative business and leadership, spiritual emergence, and Jungian psychology and shadow work. We've got experiential electives. We've got weekly lectures and study groups. It's an amazingly deep course, and then you're part of the community forever. So if you want to stay part of Vital, we have monthly webinars. Every 2 weeks, we've got a drop-in Vital Elements group. We have consultation groups and an online community that we belong to. And Glauber is one of our teachers. He'll be teaching in our next cohort, module 1. So I'm going to pop in the chat for everyone the link to Vital. Applications are open now until August 23rd. And if you would like to save $2,000, then you can apply now and be accepted by July 22nd. And that's early bird discount at $2,000 off. So I'll just pop that in the chat there. vitalpsychedelictraining.com. Okay, so back to why we are here today. It's not to hear me talking, so I'm going to hand over really soon to Glauber. So Glauber's talking today about ayahuasca and the globalization of this medicine, of a culture, of a spiritual movement, particularly looking at the Santo Daime practice. And so the title of this webinar is Forest Medicine in the International Diaspora. And Glauber is someone that is deeply experienced in holding space in ceremonies in Brazil. He is a researcher of sacred plants. He's a dad and does quite a bit of work around psychedelic parenthood. So that's something that hopefully we'll touch on now and more in focus at a later time. And so Glauber also worked on a book, Women and Psychedelics. And we recently interviewed Dr. Erica Dick, who was also one of the editors of that book. So you can listen to that from 2 weeks ago as well, if you'd like. So really an honor to have you here, Glauber. And if folks want to ask questions, pop them in the Q&A box. We will have 15 minutes, hopefully at the end, to have questions and answer with Glauber. And yes, the recording will be posted to YouTube, usually within 24 hours or so. So you can tell people about it as well if they want to catch up on this webinar. Over to you, Glauber. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for inviting me. Such an honor, a pleasure. Psychedelics today has been one of my main inspirations in the field. And when I met you in New York, I had one of the best moments I had so far in the US. And I'm really grateful, and I will do my best to offer some humble reflections about ayahuasca traditions abroad, forest medicine in the international diaspora. So, hello everyone. And David gave a very generous introduction about me. So, I try to be as fast as I can here. And I'm just saying a few words about myself. I'm calling in from Brazil, Santa Luzia, and I'm a 37-year-old Brazilian sociologist. I've been an ayahuasca practitioner for 15 years now and lead an ayahuasca Santo Daime church here in Brazil for 10 years now. I am also the co-founder of Jornadas de Kura, that is a plant medicine center in Brazil that promotes a bridge between the ceremonial use of sacred plants, public education on plant medicine, and psychedelic science. And I am also an indigenous rights activist and the director of the Psychedelic Parenthood Community, and I'm a proud psychedelic guy, a dad of three children, and live with my wife Jacqueline Rodrigues here in Brazil, in Minas Gerais. That is a place known also for finding the oldest human fossil in South America, and also for the Quilombola people, the Black communities that survived colonization and flourished a very beautiful culture here in Brazil. So thank you very much for receiving me here. And we are going to discuss ayahuasca. And I bet you all are familiar with ayahuasca and this topic. Ayahuasca is a Quechua name, actually, that we can translate as the vine of the dead or the vine of the souls in a more poetic way. But the important thing to know here is that ayahuasca is just a generic name. This is important topic of conversation. Academic field use a lot of this word ayahuasca, and also in the global north, ayahuasca is a generic term, is a big umbrella. But it's important to acknowledge we are talking about a very diverse field with dozens of indigenous peoples, different biocultures, different worldviews, different cosmological approach on this sacred drink. So every single indigenous people, they have their own way to call, to name, to deal with this medicine. So the Huniquin people, they call ayahuasca Nishipan. The Yawanawa people, they call ayahuasca Uni. The União do Vegetal adherents, they call ayahuasca vegetal. Iahé is also a possible name for the Kofan, for example. And the Ashanika, they will call ayahuasca Camarampi. And when we are talking about ayahuasca, we are also talking about different plants. And we can find dozens of different plants that can be used to make this sacred drink. But the most classical or the most popular recipe is the mixture of Banisteriopsis capi, the ayahuasca vine, and Psychotria viridis, the ayahuasca leaf, chacruna. And the leaves contain DMT, there is a serotonin 5-HT2A receptor agonist, and the vine contains harmine, harmaline, among other MAOI alkaloids. But ayahuasca is scheduled in several countries. For example, it was scheduled in the 1971 Vienna Convention, and ayahuasca is known in many cultures, also because of the visionary state that ayahuasca can produce. So in Brazilian Portuguese, we call this state of consciousness that is non-ordinary, the miração, borracheira, afluido. And when we are talking about ayahuasca, we can't go very deep on this subject here, but I just want to mention that we are talking about religion and religious freedom. We are talking about drug policy. We are discussing culture. We are discussing also science. So it's a deep conversation. It's not just a beverage or a drink. It's much more than that. And it's also ayahuasca is also ancestral knowledge, ancestral wisdom, but a very recent diaspora actually. And very recently, researchers, they found archaeological evidence of at least 1,000 years of ayahuasca use. So it's actually very ancient. But ayahuasca only began to become popular in the West in the 60s and the 70s under the influence of counterculture and literature. So, for example, the Yahé letters that was published in the 1963, and also the Castaneda books, for example, Teachings of Don Juan. And now, in the it was very fast, but now we have millions of people taking ayahuasca around the world. And this is a very interesting data because Brazil and the US are the countries with the largest number of people consuming ayahuasca. And more, according to ICEERS, that is a very solid organization, more than 1/3 of all ayahuasca consumers in the world are from the the USA, which is pretty interesting and surprising since ayahuasca is not native from the United States. And here we have a couple of reasons for the ayahuasca boom. It's important to understand, to try to interpret what is going on. And one of these aspects is the crisis of modernity. So we are living in an uncertain world, and people are looking for healing, for meaning in life. So the search for meaning as well, the reenchantment of the world. So in the crisis that we are living in, it's also there's also a need for reenchanting the world, for making things more magical. And in this movement, we also have the romanticization of the Amazon rainforest and the traditional, which can be good, but can be not so good as well. We are going to talk about this a little later. The psychedelic renaissance or psychedelic resurgence is also a very important reason for the ayahuasca boom now. The New Age movement, that is a deep conversation as well, but this search of from people from the global north for different traditions, for different ways of living spirituality. This is also important. It comes also with the well-being and the fitness culture from the global north, and also very important concerns on climate change and how to be more connected with the forest. And we also have a very interesting element of decoloniality, the wisdom and the science from the indigenous peoples also becoming something that people want to take seriously now. And we can also see a lot of indigenous resistance, indigenous organizations, indigenous conferences going on now that can help us understand why ayahuasca is becoming so popular nowadays. And regarding the Brazilian traditions, now it's my sociological side speaking, we are also living a Brazilian diaspora. So Brazil is no longer a country of immigrants, but an emigrant country. Brazil is an exporter of religions and cultural manifestations such as samba, for example, carnival, capoeira, and we are living a diaspora of Brazilian religions, including the fundamentalist evangelicals as well. And this is the reason I have this slide here is because this is a reflection of the internationalization of practices and rites from the global south. For example, the Mexican conchera dance, Indian religious movement, and so on. And I will bring Santo Daime as my case study here just to illustrate something that is wider and that is about ayahuasca. So some of these Santo Daime examples also works when you're talking about ayahuasca in general. So Santo Daime is the first Brazilian ayahuasca religion. And this is an interesting information as well because Brazil is the only country in the world in which religions were found founded with the consumption of ayahuasca. And Santo Daime was founded in the 1930s, by Raimundo Irineu Serra. It's this guy here, and he was a grandson of people who were enslaved. So Santo Daime, in a sense, also represents the confluence between the Brazilian indigenous religions, and also the indigenous world of ayahuasca and Catholic folk Christianity of Brazil. So it's interesting to also take a look into Mestre Irineu's biography. And for Santo Daime members, ayahuasca is consumed as a sacrament. And Santo Daime also remained located only in the Amazon rainforest until the 1980s. And then Santo Daime started to also live a very, very fast and impressive internationalization. And nowadays we can find Santo Daime rituals in at least 43 countries. And this brings a lot of interesting discussions on, for example, music, because we know that music is not only a tool or a sacred technology or a sacred portal, but actually music creates the non-ordinary experience of ayahuasca. And when we have an ayahuasca diaspora, we also have change, we have adaptations in the ayahuasca music. And this brings a lot of interesting conversations on religion, philosophy, tradition, and so on. So just to give one example here, the Santo Daime religion is based on sacred chants that they Daimistas call hymns, sacred hymns. And these sacred hymns, people believe that they are channeled by spiritual inspiration. And most of them were channeled in, actually, all of them were channeled in Portuguese in the beginning of this religion. And then when Santo Daime start living at the diaspora, people start discussing, should we translate the songs? Should we adapt the melodies? This brings a lot of interesting conversations on how to keep sacred. What is sacred anyway? About translation, for example, there are some people that they say, "Can you imagine the Bible without being translated?" And there are other people that say, "Can you imagine Indian mantra being translated to English? This would make no sense for meditation." So we have a kind of a musical war inside the ayahuasca realm as well. This is a very interesting conversation, but I want to focus here on the potentials and the challenges of the world ayahuasca diaspora. This is a complex movement that we are seeing, that we are living, and there are some potentials that are interesting as well. And a good side about it. So ayahuasca spaces abroad, they become embassies of the global south. So we go to the Netherlands, for example, in Amsterdam, and then we see local Santo Daime churches receiving people from Brazil. We go to some international retreats in Costa Rica, and we see people receiving indigenous elders from Peru, Shipibo singers and shamans. So this is a very interesting side of this movement. And also there are counter-colonial effects. Like we have ancestral cultures that are surviving and that now are also being acknowledged by people from the global north. And there is an appreciation, which is very interesting, of traditional practices, although we have also a romanticization that can be challenging, also of people from the global south. I remember a case here that is kind of funny. And when I went to Germany 12 years ago, I was just starting my path in ayahuasca, but I'm still a Brazilian. I'm still a guy from the global south. And then I went to a book launch in Amsterdam, and there were people saying there like, "Oh, can you see there's a Brazilian guy here?" So it this means that this gathering here, this meeting, this launch is very important. And I was treated like a celebrity from the global south, even though I was just a student. And the same thing happened when I was in Mexico more than 10 years ago. And I was just using my rapé. I had no formal training. I had no permission to be a rapé leader of ceremonies in Mexico. But people saw me taking rapé, and they announced it there. We have a Brazilian shaman here carrying a lot of wisdom and tradition. So these are just two small examples and humble examples on how romanticization can be something complicated. We also have therapeutic potentials about ayahuasca and a lot of very good research being done on the potentials of ayahuasca for human mental health, and also interesting cultural exchange that can happen. So we can also see nowadays organizations in the global north investing in indigenous projects. We can see new networks of philanthropy, for example, the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative, the Indigenous Medicine Conservation Fund, among others. We have nowadays the indigenous ayahuasca conferences in Brazil that are just amazing. It's the biggest gathering of ayahuasca indigenous peoples that we have in the whole world, that emerged and was created as a reaction on the international conferences on the topic. So nowadays we also have a growing relevance of indigenous leaders in the urban ayahuasca field in South America and also abroad. Here's a picture of the Vico Penawa Yanomami, who wrote a book that was translated to several languages. In English, it's called The Falling Sky, and it's just a beautiful anthropological reflection on the future of the planet Earth. And we also have something that is interesting and remembers us and reminds us that indigenous cultures, they are also in general, because we always need to consider how diverse indigenous peoples they are, but they are also open to changes, to adaptations. And nowadays we can see different designs of rituals, new cultural modalities, such as the so-called house music. House is a sacred word that some people in the global north are using now to express gratitude. For example, now we have this circuit of indigenous musicians that is known by many people as the house music. And we have different indigenous declarations on this topic that can be also very powerful. And we have also, of course, many challenges, dilemmas, crossroads, and some of them are related to the financial aspect of this diaspora that we need to consider. So here we have this narrative of the mythology of Santo Daime. So it's entitled here, From Moon Woman to Black Man, Santo Daime Mythology. So I'm going to tell you how Santo Daime was born. On a clear and beautiful night, Irineu took ayahuasca, and as he looked up at the moon, he saw a beautiful lady. She asked him, "Who do you think I am?" Amazed, Irineu looked at her and replied, "My lady, you must be a universal goddess." This female entity was later identified as the Queen of the Forest. She then directed her disciple to go through a series of fasts and trials, after which she granted him the right to make a wish. Raimundo Irineu Serra asked to become a great healer to help people and requested that she put all her healing powers into that brew. The Queen of the Forest granted him this request, stressing that he should never make money from his services with the daime, with ayahuasca. And then we have this question, this debate that is very important. We need to make it and to be brave enough to reflect on this thing that is the international context of commodification of ayahuasca. Nowadays, we are living and seeing a very flourishing but also problematic shamanic tourism, involving also not only the global south and South America, but also Caribbean island, Costa Rica, Jamaica, the US, and we have corporate and business interests in the sacred plants of the Americas. We also live a media hype around sacred plants, a Western demand for the traditional and the ancestral, a new age market for healing practices, and of course, the psychedelic science discovering a lot of important evidence on the benefits of these plants and pharmaceutical companies' interests. And this internationalization, this diaspora, this interest also affects and have backlashes in the forest. And nowadays, even the way in which people produce ayahuasca has changed. I'm not going to say if this is bad or good. I'm just going to say that things are changing and changing fast and affecting, for example, the production of daime or the production of ayahuasca. So nowadays we can see new varieties of the sacred drink. We can see new ways of preserving ayahuasca, exchange with other plant medicine, trades involving ayahuasca. So, for example, the vast majority of the ayahuasca that is produced in the whole world is still made in the global south, although nowadays people are also planting ayahuasca in places like Hawaii, for example, which makes things easier to distribute ayahuasca in the US and brings a lot of interesting questions as well. But in order to distribute and to export the ayahuasca from the global south, it's also important to be able to pass through the customs, right? To take ayahuasca with people in the airports, airplanes, flights, and so on. So nowadays, people usually they also make more concentrated ayahuasca. So we have the ayahuasca gel that is not liquid anymore. We have the ayahuasca honey that it's much more concentrated than the traditional ayahuasca or than the traditional daime. And this is something interesting because also comes with a different mythology and narratives that are also spiritual, but are also is also something produced by the movement that we are living nowadays regarding distribution of ayahuasca. And I was expecting to show a video, but I had some technical problems here, so please forgive me. I will do this next time. And now, instead of answering questions, I wanna ask you some questions, if possible, about the contemporary ceremonies. How is the notion of healing understood in a ritual context in the global north? We all call ayahuasca a sacred medicine or a plant medicine, but sometimes we don't have actually a good notion on how different the notions of healing can be if we compare traditional settings with urban settings. How does the international spiritual retreat market relate to indigenous cultures and peoples? This is a difficult but important question. How are these medicines produced and distributed, and how are the profits shared? I don't know if you have or if you had a lot of chances to sit in ceremony, but do you know the origin of the medicine you take in these ceremonies? Do you know how they were produced? Who is going to keep the profits of the ceremony? What kind of people benefit from these ceremonies? Do vulnerable people without financial resources have access to them? Who are the people leading ceremonies in the global north? What is their educational background? What kind of ties do they have with traditional peoples and knowledge? So we are living a commodification of plant medicines and also their experts. And this also affects international retreats, although we have a lot of serious and committed people. And I want and I need to say that also are holding very, very interesting retreat centers abroad. But just a couple of questions. Who owns the retreat? Are locals in position of power? Are they partners in the centers? Are there sliding scale options, scholarship available for those who cannot afford, for example, because these traditions they were founded in general by very humble people. Are there projects to give back to the local communities? Is there financial transparency? Because I don't know if you know that, but we can see people selling a bottle of ayahuasca for $1,000 in New York, for example. But then we go further and we realize that the shaman who boiled and made this ayahuasca received $10 or $20. So where does the medicine come from? We also have conservation, marketing issues because some people they are so excited about everything related to the sacred medicines that they don't realize that when they buy a jaguar bone necklace, a jaguar is going to be dead for that. And some people are killing jaguars just to make things to sell to tourists. So this is a delicate and sensitive topic of conversation, although pretty interesting as well. Now, just a few, not going too deep on that, I'm just going to read some good information about the legal aspects of ayahuasca in Brazil, because I think Brazil has a lot of problems nowadays, but also has good examples. And the legal context of ayahuasca in Brazil, it's really inspiring and interesting because ayahuasca and its plants are not considered controlled substances in Brazil. Ayahuasca is not technically legal, but regulated for religious purposes here. We have an ayahuasca a debate on patrimonialization now. For the first time in Brazilian history, we have an ayahuasqueira minister, Margarete Menezes, and we faced several challenges during the Bolsonaro government, such as the bill that is now, thank God, shelved on ayahuasca. And for the first time in Brazilian history, we have a Ministry of Indigenous Peoples. And Benki Pianco, that is an ayahuasca leader, was part of the government's transition team. Here in Brazil, pregnant women and children, they can take ayahuasca because in Brazil, parents' rights prevail on this topic. But ayahuasca, there can be no profit related to ayahuasca in Brazilian territory. I have here a lot of interesting data. I'm not going to show this now because I want to save some time for Q&A. But if you are interested, just text David and then we can discuss this later about Europe and many countries. For this webinar, I just want to share with you some info about the US context and the DEA report on ayahuasca. You know that ayahuasca is a Schedule 1 substance in the US. And although there have been important legal victories for ayahuasca churches, especially the União do Vegetal victory in the Supreme Court, some Santo Daime churches, notably in the Oregon state, and more recently, the Church of the Eagle and the Condor. And I recommend you the brilliant work of my friends Alison Hoots and Sean McAllister on this subject. And on February 13, 2023, the DEA released a single document in response to a Freedom of Information Act request presented by Chacruna Institute and the Church of the Eagle and the Condor. This document, titled Ayahuasca, Risks to Public Health and Safety, was issued in July 2020, and despite losses in legal battles, the advancement of clinical trials showing therapeutic potentials of psychedelics and decriminalization initiatives spreading across the country, the DEA is not ready to give up on its moral crusade against sacred plants. The document is a political and not scientific piece trying to establish that the use of ayahuasca is a public health problem in the US and that ayahuasca should be banned. And the reason I'm telling this to you now is because we should not take for granted that everything's going to be fine with ayahuasca and regulation and legalization. We need to struggle and to take this very seriously. And now we have challenges for Santo Daime in the global context, generational challenges of membership, leadership renewal is also a very big challenge for indigenous traditions, and so on. For example, the competition in a very effervescent ayahuasca market, because now people offer ayahuasca rituals, but then there are other people offering ayahuasca rituals with rapé. But then there are other people offering ayahuasca rituals with rapé, sananga, cambô, bufo, alvários, and so on and so on. So this also affects the whole field. And of course, a lot of challenges for ayahuasca in this global context. And here I will mention just two important things. One is the persecution of ayahuasca by drug agencies worldwide. We had very important and complicated things happening in France very recently with our friend that is a leader of a Santo Daime church there, Claude Boucher, and also the difficulty in controlling the production and distribution of ayahuasca. And it's also important to be aware that although ayahuasca is very magical, is very beautiful, excess and malpractice also exist. So what kind of references do we have to define malpractices and excesses? Here we have a very important document that I would recommend you to read, that is the Ayahuasca Community Guide for the Awareness of Sexual Abuse, that was written by Emily Sinclair and Bia Labate. It's important also, since shamans are also human beings, we should avoid romanticizing groups and peoples. It's important to talk about abuse, ways to fight it, and it's very important also to talk about gender and to take gender seriously, because there are a lot of problems of cultural translations in this field. So it's not because only men are serving ayahuasca in a very specific tradition from a very specific indigenous people that only men should serve ayahuasca in urban context in the US, for example. There are some leaders that they saw shamans in the global south that were raised in a different culture and have more than one wife, and they want to imitate and naturalize that man can be polygamous while woman couldn't be, which is a completely terrible mistake, and not only mistake but also bad will. So we should be taken this seriously in order to create safe spaces for everyone, but not only that, in order also to invent spaces in which diversity is welcome, queer people are welcome, BIPOC people are protected, and so on. Just to mention that challenges are an important topic of reflection and conversation for us. But it's also a very bright conversation. And there is a Brazilian philosopher, Black philosopher called Nego Bispo, that says that now it's time to exercise confluence. So there is an antidote for commodification, which is relationship, connection, dialogue, reciprocity, sharing. So are we cultivating reciprocal relationships with indigenous knowledge and peoples when you use sacred plants? Not everything that happens in the internationalization of sacred plants and fungi is bad. There's a very good side, including, for example, the positive economic impacts on villages and regions suffering from serious social problems in the global south. And Chief Doetiro Tucano, from the Tucano people, he says that well-intentioned people from the global north can also play a very important role in defending indigenous peoples, such as lending their voice to defend the constitutional rights of indigenous peoples and demanding that companies and research centers do the same. And you can make a difference there's no need for a big revolution. There's a need for a small revolution that we can all make. So this is what I'm trying to do also here with my family. Is a picture of my children and I with an ayahuasca teacher here. So you can learn other languages. Sometimes we go to rituals in urban centers in the US, for example, and you see people singing songs in indigenous language that they don't know. So they start the ceremony, closing the ceremony, and then they close the ceremony, starting the ceremony according to the lyrics of the songs they are singing. So learn other languages, get to know other cultures, visit places in the global south in a sustainable way. You can also become a cultural translator, also to help people to understand that things that can work in an indigenous village might not work in a big city. For example, integration, preparation are things very important in an urban context. Getting involved with the cause of indigenous peoples is also something important, such as the right for land. You can become a supporter of institutions and projects that promote reciprocity, building a respectful relationship with sacred plants and their territories and cultures of origin. And it's important to understand this is just to close. It's important to understand that ayahuasca is not just made up of molecules and psychedelic substances, although they are all magical and fascinating. Ayahuasca is made up of biocultures, of ancestral traditions, and according to indigenous perspective, ayahuasca also has agency, has motivation, has a higher intelligence. And these elements need to be taken seriously if we are seeking collective healing and a way out of the dilemmas of our time, such as the climate crisis, and not just individual therapy that is very important but can solve the problems we are facing together as humankind. So, Ailton Krenak, that is a very important Brazilian indigenous elder, he has a very special quote that I always like to remember that gives us, at the same time, the necessary criticism and the possible exit for the crisis. Ailton Krenak said, they can sell a soda called ayahuasca. They can sell a hallucinogenic with the name ayahuasca. What they will never know is what a shaman talks to the plant medicine. And without knowing it, the only thing they will sell is a ticket to nowhere. So let's embrace these substances, but also their cultures, biocultures, ancestral knowledge, and wisdom. Thank you very much for your attention. With pleasure to be here. And let's go for Q&A. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Glauber. That was beautiful. Amazing. Thank you. Thanks everybody for staying tuned. It's great to see everyone here. So we've got plenty of time. If you want to drop some questions into the Q&A box, we've got a couple already. You can just see that there. I've got some questions as well, but I'm going to be polite. And Glauber, I'm going to dip into the Q&A box first. There's a couple of questions there. One person's talking about music. And when you speak about music, are you just talking about Icaros, or is there something else kind of other kind of greater than or as well as Icaros? And what are Icaros? If you could just talk more about that.
Yes, thank you very much. Music is very important for ayahuasca traditions. And we have very different music styles. So in Santo Daime, for example, people sing the hymns, and they can sing hymns using a guitar. They can sing hymns using a maracá, drums. In União do Vegetal, they have a different kind of songs they are called the chamadas. And in Shipibo tradition, for example, music is also very important. And for the Shipibo people, music, they know music as Icarus, or for some people, Icarus. This is a very deep conversation because Icarus, they are sacred songs, but they are also sacred patterns. They are also sacred art, sacred paintings and drawings. And this brings us to a very interesting conversation about, for example, synesthesia and how something can be at the same time music, at the same time other expressions of art. And in these different traditions, we also have um, music in a central role in which music helps people to create the experience. So we have sacred music to start the ceremony. So when we are talking about the Ashanika tradition, they're going to start the ceremony and they're going to bring the force, to bring the strength of ayahuasca. So they are going to sing specific songs that are connected to this energy of bringing the energy. When I was in the fourth Indigenous Ayahuasca conference, there was a very interesting moment in which the Noquecoy people that are known for being very powerful, they just sung a song there. And for some foreigners, and me included, because I don't know Noquecoy language, it was just beautiful. And then just after that, a lot of people, they started smudging the whole place, and they seemed really concerned. I didn't know why, and I asked, what's going on? And they answered me, it's because they just sung a very powerful song that is going to make everybody purge if we don't smudge the container here. So music is also about creating this relationship between human beings and other than human beings, more than human beings. It's a shamanic portal in which we are not anymore just David, Glauber, but beings that are in connection to different realms of existence.
Beautiful. Thank you, Glauber. Yeah, music as medicine. There's so much more there to explore. And maybe I'll jump in with a question. And this is around kind of the globalization of ayahuasca, and that's what this whole talk's about. And it seems to be that part of what you're saying is there is a globalization from a kind of colonial Western, global North, materialism, capitalism, spreading globalization. And there's also from the global South, maybe as an antidote, as a response, as a balance with song and music, for example, but also with nature, with culture, with community, with spirituality, and plant medicine as well. So how are you seeing this kind of meeting between these two powerful forces, and what is your hope for it maybe in the future evolving?
Thank you for this question, David. I think it's very important, provocative, and inspiring, and we have different approaches and perspectives on that. For some people, for example, my friend Francisco Apurina, he thinks and he believes that ayahuasca and the sacred plants, they should be there in the forest. That's it. There are some other people that believe, for example, that these plants, they have agency. So if there are people in Japan nowadays holding space for ceremony, it's because these plants, they want to do that. They want to spread their energy. They want to teach human beings how to be more connected with nature, because we are all nature. So we need to, yeah, get to know ourselves better and again. And what I think is that this is very, very inspiring. And we are living a very interesting anthropological encounter between different cultures. And I think they can benefit from each other. And now, just before we started this conversation, my two sons, they arrived here, and then I needed to talk to them a little bit, and this reminded me and remembered me on how we can see that we love something or that we care about something. It's also about how much time we do spend with something we love or someone we love. So what I would say is that it's important to spend time building relationship. So people are talking a lot about ayahuasca, everybody's an expert and so on, but how much time are people really spending building these bridges, building these relationships? So how many indigenous friends, all these big investors they have when they are talking about ayahuasca? So I think a good measure of how things are going is how much love, how much care we are spending on learning, but also teaching the indigenous leaders that I know that I respect the most, for example, Biracia, Wanawa, Benki Pianco, they are very open. They want to learn also from other people. They want to learn how to use different technologies. They want support, but they also want to be respected as people who know what they are doing and who know something that is really important, how to rescue our future, because we are always concerned about the future, but actually the future is ancestral because all these challenges we are living, for example, climate change, indigenous people and indigenous knowledge, they already know how to deal with that. They already know how to create spaces in which human beings can be part of nature. So just don't know if I answer is it properly, but I would say it's important to really be open to build relationships. It's all about relationships.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. And I think the piece about building relationships is having conversations, having difficult conversations, and exploring where that conversation leads into. And it's like parenting, which we'll talk more about, is difficult conversations, and it evolves as a relationship. We've got someone raising a hand. Do you want to just say
Well,
something, Glauber?
yeah, just one more comment.
Mm.
As ayahuasca is really such a special teacher, David, that if you want to drink ayahuasca, first you need to plant a seed, and then you need to take care of this plant. And after several years, this plant is going to offer you a very, very special healing medicine, you know?
Mm. So patience and growing and waiting. Yeah, beautiful. We've got a few minutes left, and maybe a quick question someone's asking: is ayahuasca the abuela? Some Titans have told me that. What's your position on this name, abuela, for ayahuasca?
Thank you. This is interesting. Actually, it's not very common uh, to see indigenous peoples and ayahuasca traditions from the global south to call ayahuasca abuela. So this is a very good example, although we can find this, of course, but for different traditions, ayahuasca has a different identity. Some people believe that ayahuasca is a perfect balance between the masculine energy, the feminine energy. There are some people that believe that ayahuasca has a masculine power. Other people that think and that believe that ayahuasca is very feminine. But in the US, not only in the US, but in the global north in general, ayahuasca is becoming more and more and more treated as an abuela or a grandmother, which is interesting and which can be very meaningful, but also uh, teaches us how we can take some things for granted. And once we see something, we naturalize this something as the universal. And ayahuasca is also about diversity. So while also acknowledging that ayahuasca can be very loving abuela, ayahuasca can be a lot of different things as well. And my invitation is to be open to this diversity.
Beautiful. And very briefly, going to squeeze in a question that we've got about integration. And that's a big part of the psychedelic work in the global north. A lot of attention's spoken about integration. This person saying, but as I understand in the global south in traditional ayahuasca work, there's not so much emphasis on integration and not trying to try so hard to take meanings out of the ayahuasca journeys to let the gifts reveal themselves over time. So what would you say about that and any advice around integration and ayahuasca use?
Yeah, thank you. We had time to discuss this in depth in the other psychedelics today presentations that we had. It's a very fascinating topic, but in short, I would say that this is a whole universe of discussion. And some people they believe in some traditions that if you see something in ayahuasca, if you have a vision, you should not tell everybody because this is very precious. It's like a treasure. It's like a sacred gift that's only for you. And there are some people that also say, yes, in the Amazon rainforest, people don't need integration because the ceremonies are already integrated in nature, in the forest. So it's different there. So we need my 2 cents here, in short, would say we need to take setting as a central aspect of sacred plant medicine experience, and integration can be something really, really, really powerful and really important, especially in urban centers, because in big cities, people go to ceremonies and then they take the train, they take the bus, and they take the airplane, and then they need to work the other day. So this brings a lot of different challenges, but also this brings a very interesting invitation of how we can create safe spaces for people. So integration is also an open discussion. Some people they are naturalizing like integration protocols as universal protocols, but I would dare to say that we can do differently, we can do better, we can still co-create very special things.
Awesome. That was a great question and great answer. Thank you, everybody, for watching and being part of this and asking great questions. Glauber, thank you. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Touch it down, Dave.
So tell people where they can find you, any websites, any projects that you've got that you want to tell people about.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm so happy for being here. I'm sorry for my English, everyone, because I got so excited that I couldn't avoid being very fast. And I live here in Brazil, and we are trying to create a very, very special retreat center that is called Jornadas de Kura, that also has a partnership with three different indigenous peoples, and you are all invited to be part of it. And we are trying to make this also an anthropological experience so people can make ayahuasca and honor the plants. And I'm also involved with the Psychedelic Parenthood Community. We want to create a network, an ecosystem of parents and caregivers that can share their experiences together, because we know that thousands of psychedelic people, they are also caregivers, but they still don't have a lot of opportunities to be together in community. So if you are interested, if you are a parent, if you are a caregiver, if you are interested in having this conversation, let me know. I mean, especially in LinkedIn and Instagram, you can find me, Glauber Loures, Glauberloures. And but I also recommend you to talk to David and Psychedelics Today and Vital, because they are such an inspiration for me. And if you are in touch with them in a kind of way, we are also in touch. So thank you, David. I hope we can meet each other soon.
Yeah, thank you, Glauber. Really looking forward to doing more classes with you and more events and hopefully retreats in Brazil. That would be the dream come true. So Glauber will be teaching in the first module of our new Vital cohort that starts September 17th. So we've got some amazing teachers in module one. Glauber is one of them. And if you would like to apply, I just popped it into the chat box. It's vitalpsychedelictraining.com. The early bird discount finishes July 22nd. So apply now so that you can be interviewed and hopefully accepted by then. And it's $2,000 off. And classes start September 17th. And if you haven't checked out the latest cohort, we're going to actually have a couple of changes. The biggest is being that you can graduate with a major, so a specialization in one of 5 areas. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen the latest on Vital. Otherwise, just beautiful day. Yeah, I love that we are part of this globalization and we are not just passive audience members, we are active participants. And I really love one of the things that you said there, Glauber, about we are actual active kind of cultural translators and ambassadors in the movement of our world's cultures and histories evolving, reclaiming our kind of spiritual kind of human essence and solidarity. So yeah, we're part of this. Deep breaths, challenging time, beautiful time. So yeah, blessings everyone. Glauber, thank you. Until the next time. God bless everybody.